Happy Tuesday and welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we have Sivonnia DeBarros on the Wolff Den. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm doing amazing.
Great. Looking forward to the chat. We're going to touch on a lot of stuff. But for those in the audience who don't know who you are, just give a quick intro and then we'll get into it.
Absolutely. So, as he mentioned, I'm Sivonnia DeBarros. I'm also known as the protector of athletes, and I'm an attorney. So, most people don't know that about me. I own a law company called the S.L. DeBarros Law Firm, where I represent million-dollar brands, including athletes and business. Now, what I love to do, because law is my love language, what I do at my firm is I help athletes and million-dollar brand owners to increase their bottom line by boosting their legal protection. So that is something that I just love. I'm a protector by nature. So
what is protector of athletes? What does that mean?
yeah, I think it embodies one, I'm the eldest of several kids. So there are four of us, and being the eldest, you always kind of have this, I don't know, I want to say parental approach, which I try my best not to act as though I'm my sibling's parent, but just have always had this form of authoritative type of mentality. So I've always have been in a place of protecting my siblings, protecting my friends, protecting the things that I care about. And so it literally just grew over the last several years around supporting and having a passion for helping athletes to understand who they are, what they want out of their lives, but also to protect the things that they are investing in. So that's really what protective athletes is all about, to make sure that they are holistically and well-rounded, protected in a way where it's not just like locking them down on something, but protection in the sense of arming you with information to help you make better decisions.
Yeah, I totally get it. When you're older, it doesn't have to be older. Sometimes when you're just a sibling, there's a feeling you have about wanting to help and support and protect your brothers and sisters, and then as we go into business and having customers, clients, you want to protect them as well. Obviously, from a legal point of view,
Absolutely.
that's the biggest, most important thing is being protected legally. You have the legal background. You're also an athlete yourself. You did
Former.
former. Well, we're all former athletes, I guess. You ran some track.
I did. Yep. Track and field athlete at University of South Florida. And what a lot of people don't know, fun fact about Sivonnia, I was also a competitive cheerleader. Would have loved to do that in college. But in terms of trying out for the cheerleading team, that was in conflict with the schedule for the track and field. So, of course, like track won.
It feels like competitive cheerleading has really skyrocketed in the last few years. I have some friends whose children are participating, and it's almost like it's kind of crazy, the scheduling and the
Oh, it is
rigorous
very
nature of it.
wild. Yeah, it's very wild. Competitive cheerleading, in my opinion, has always been something that a lot of people knew about. At least our competitions were always always lit. So it was amazing back when I was doing it. I think the difference is people's ideas around competitive cheerleading, because I will always hear, oh, well, cheerleading isn't really a sport. Yes, it is. And in fact, when I was in high school, one of the junior level, I'm about to say junior level attorney, one of the junior level cheerleaders on their squad ended up coming down from a lift and they dropped her. And the girl had to wear like this head shield for, I want to say at least a year, maybe two.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is a dangerous, high, fast paced sport. You could possibly sustain some of the same injuries that a pro footballer would sustain, or maybe even worse. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
That's always an interesting conversation. I put it more of a competition, but it doesn't negate the athletic ability that you need and the stamina and the strength and all of that. I
Yeah.
consider it more of a competition than a sport. That's probably, we're playing semantics here. It's not easy to do. I'm not getting now, certainly not, but even back then, I wasn't getting in line to lift and throw and getting a pyramid and all that stuff anyway.
Hmm.
What was your specialty in track?
So in college, I did the 200, attempted the open four. My coach made me do the open four. So those were my two events. Going back to high school, I did like almost everything. My coach made me the team captain, but I've always loved sprints. I've never been a mid distance or a long distance runner. That is just not my thing. So, but yeah, I've always been a sprinter and have absolutely loved it. Even now as an adult and without being fully into the sport, I still get out, run, and do different things. And in fact, if I'm working out in the house, the workouts that I really like are the ones that are more almost like track workouts, which is kind of weird. Like, you ever heard of Shanti? I love his stuff.
No.
Shanti is insane. Like, oh, he actually has a workout called Insanity, and it truly is insane. But it feels like I'm on the freaking track doing some crazy, crazy workouts. So,
What was the name of that?
Insanity with Shanti.
Shanti. No,
Yeah, he has a different one now. T25, like exercise in 25 minutes.
I've
But his
heard of all
cardio is
these.
insane.
I've heard of all these, and there's a lot of insane workouts that I see people. My neighbor
Man,
across the street does it every day. It's
makes
like,
you
oh,
burn quick though. You don't need to be working out for an hour, 2 hours. Like, get some quick cardio in and you drop like that.
yeah, it's good. It's certainly good exercise. Some of it,
Hmm.
I'd be like, you can certainly get injuries there. I don't know if we're going to call that a sport. You can get plenty of. I've seen plenty of people get injured in that.
Probably because they're not stretching or eating right.
Yeah.
So
What when you're running track, at some point you realize, you know, my career is going to be over as an athlete, and
mhm.
I think in track, it's, where can you go? You can go to world championships, you go to Olympics, but that's such a, like, 1% of 1%. So
Mhm.
as you're doing it, at what point did you start to think, what am I going to do after I'm done? And how did you end up choosing law?
Yeah, well, my story is much different from most of college athletes, or even high school athletes who are transitioning to college. Law was always something that I wanted to do. I've spoken on this so many times about just having that passion as a child, literally like a baby, 4 or 5 years old, of wanting to be an attorney. And of course, back then I wasn't running track, you know what I mean? So it was a burning desire that I had, and I knew that at some point in my life I was still going to be an attorney. And that's why it's so important for athletes to understand who they are outside of their sport. There is something else that you love to do, and what is that thing? It doesn't mean that you can't do it, in conjunction to the other thing. But having something that you're passionate about that keeps you grounded is the thing that will help you to better transition. um, in, I want to say, either my junior or my senior year, I injured my left leg. That leg has never been the same. So even at the college level, and then thinking about generally the type of food we would eat, not having money to really buy nutritious foods, I stayed injured. And so I knew it was something that, yeah, I may have dreamed of being an Olympic athlete at some point in my life, but I mean, reality is reality. It's not going to happen like this. I'm not performing well. I'm constantly injured. I definitely was never really to my best. And so it was just, it's like, okay, that's not going to happen. But I knew that education was the out for me. And I've always have been brought up and taught that education is power. So I knew that also being an attorney, I had to be educated to even get to that space. Like, all of the steps you have to take to become a lawyer is not easy. It takes you about 7 to 8 years anyway, just to become an attorney. And my behind when he got a master's degree before I went to law school. So why did I do that? I don't know. But anywho, so yeah, so for me, I always knew that that was going to happen. Um, and when school was over and I graduated, that was my next step, is applying to law schools.
Where did you end up?
Chicago, Kent. I graduated from there in 2013.
And when you go to law school, did you have an idea of what type of law you wanted to practice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I came over to Chicago, so one of the things that drew me to this area was the fact that Chicago seemed to be such a melting pot of different people, diverse cultures and language. And that's just something I've always loved. Even as a young child and a high school student, my friends have always been from various backgrounds. So Chicago really drew my attention in that way. And then I also knew that I wanted to possibly be a Cook County prosecutor. So I've always wanted to be technically a criminal lawyer. And at one time, I said, okay, I want to be a criminal defense attorney because I even knew at a young age and seeing some of my relatives and how they were profiled and victimized by police, it was something in me where I said, I want to be there to help people. And at some point, that changed for me. And I said, okay, I think I want to be a prosecutor because I started realizing that prosecutors have the ability to move forward with a case. They have the decision, they can make the decision of whether they will prosecute a case or not. Right. And so, when I came to Chicago, I clerked for this Cook County State's Attorney's Office for a year in the felony trial division, which is the highest level of the criminal division. And at that moment, I saw the disparity. Like it's not on paper what you would normally read. I saw it, and I think it took me at least about 3 months for me to be able to walk into those offices and walk into court and not have it make or create this physiological impact on me. Like it was wild. So it was something that I wanted to do, and I did apply for that job. I didn't get past the rounds or whatever, but I also felt like God has he has something on my life, and maybe that's not where I'm supposed to be. And I listened to that. I leaned into that. And I went to this attorney general's office after clerking for the Cook County State Attorney's Office. And I engaged in some constitutional law representation. We would go. So at this point, um, versus being at the Cook County State Attorney's Office, it's like being in state court, arguing motions and trials in front of the judge based on some form of criminal violation, right? Well, at the Attorney General's Office, what I was doing was making constitutional arguments for the state when prisoners would bring up constitutional law violations. So if they've already been convicted of a crime and they're saying, okay, well, this officer has done something to me. Well, now we have to look at what that constitutional claim would be because the officer is an extension of the state. You know what I mean? So that was exciting and gave me a lot of experience as well. But there was still something that I needed to do for me. And I truly believe that, our lives work out the way that they're supposed to. We just need to be flexible to fold into those areas of where we're destined to be. And so here I am doing something completely different that I had not
Yeah.
planned on doing.
I don't always, does everything happen for a reason? I guess, I can look at that a little bit, but then you look at some of the negative things that happen, you're like, well, what
Yeah, I know.
possible good can come from that? That's probably a whole nother conversation.
Hmm.
Interesting thing about law, my wife is an attorney, turned magistrate judge, and then decided to leave that and does mediation now. And one of the things she struggled with is it's just her hands are kind of tied to what really makes sense as
Decision.
opposed to what the law is. That's something that weighs on a judge, and it could also weigh on the prosecutor or the defense, because it's like if I'm a prosecutor, you'd be like, well, I kind of have to prosecute this even though it shouldn't be. And then as a defender, you're like, I got to defend this person and try and help them, even though I'm pretty sure they're guilty. I'm like, they're you just have to try and defend them.
Yeah.
For me, that's not something I don't think I'd be able to do. And then the other side of that, I want to hear your thoughts, are when people are arguing about something, generally speaking, it's not about right or wrong. It's more about like that law needs to be changed. They're mad at the law.
Sometimes.
The law is the law, and people are not following the law,
Yeah.
and they're arguing that like that's pretty cut and dry. But it's like, all right, we need to maybe change these laws because it might not be fair.
Yeah, and I used to want to be a lawyer. I mean, a lawyer, Jesus, I'm already a lawyer, a judge. I used to want to be a judge, and some part of me deep down still kind of have that aspiration, but now knowing what I know and have had the opportunity to work in different aspects of government, I could have way more influence by being a legislator
Yeah,
versus being a judge because
and
the
an
judge
attorney, and an attorney. You have a
and an
way
attorney,
more
an attorney. I
influence
mean,
on
at
the
least
outcome.
right. At least I have the ability as an attorney to make compelling arguments of why something shouldn't be applied the way that it is. But at the end of the day, the judge can only take precedent that has been created by other judges and based on the law. And so many times their hands are absolutely tied because um, the only way that they can make a different application is if the legislature changes the law. And so and sometimes in some cases in some decisions you would very well see judges pull congressional notes and the history of it to try to understand what is the true meaning behind it, because technically you will have people who've never practiced law in the sense of in a court or jury, and they don't know how their words are playing out. So that is really the uphill battle I think that our society faces. But to your point, sometimes there are issues where it's not about this part. Technically, neither party has been acting maliciously or wrong. It's a matter of fact that the law is just bad. It's just bad law, you
Bad
know,
law. It's not being applied equally to everyone, which we
equally
can talk
correct.
about that. A lot.
Yep. Yep. And so there would need to be some form of amendments. And I think when you have more cases around an example like that or an issue that is just not applied equally, has catastrophic impact across the nation, then that raises more of awareness for attorneys to be able to possibly get those claims to the Supreme Court to hear and be able to create some laws that are applicable evenly across the country. But the Supreme Court chooses what cases it wants to hear. So they could say, well, you know what, state court judges, y'all figure it out.
Now, it's
Right.
become a lot more political. Like someone was asking me the other day about, what is your wife a Democrat or Republican? And we had a sign on our lawn supporting someone who was running for judge. Like, was that person a Democrat or Republican? Like, well, they're not. It's not. It's bipartisan, right? But it's become more. It's hard to take that stuff out of it. So it's become more and more of that. But really, the law is the law. Can we change some of these laws? I think some of them need to be, right. You talk about the
Right.
Constitution that was written a long time ago, even
Mhm.
laws that were written in the 40s and the 50s. I mean, we're living in a way different place than it was then. I assume I wasn't alive then, but we can assume that. The thing for me in law is there's not enough deterrent for bad behavior, and
Mm.
I don't think we should be having like China, like capital punishment. But I think the punishment should fit the crime, and it should be a punishment to where you're really going to think twice before you do something like that. Because at the end of the day, whatever laws we have, they're not that difficult to follow. I don't think.
So that I get what you're saying, but I think it also depends on the community and the culture. Um, because we do know in this country that laws have been applied inequitably, that it's easier for some people to be able to overcome issues versus others. And so, in that vein, there definitely have to be some rectification around how laws are created and who it predominantly will impact in a negative way, so getting to the systemic issues of matters, right? um but yeah, I mean, it's a lot that can be said about that, which I don't think we got time to dive
No,
into.
well, we always get into these topics, and it's like for a whole nother discussion. I will say that the thing that I watched Dahmer. I actually binge watched like 8
Yeah,
episodes.
I binge watched that too. I was like, this
And the
is
big takeaway for me was, how the hell did this happen? Like, and we know why. It was, somewhat of racist police, and then homophobic. I think
yeah.
the gay aspect can't be understated on that. But that's the big takeaway for me was, and I'm sure they embellished it. It might not have been as bad, but regardless, it's better today. But it's not. There's still a lot of this stuff going on.
Right. And if you think about it, even in other contexts, now we have name, image, and likeness for student athletes. When we create certain rules and laws and regulation, if certain people are not being provided with certain resources, it will still have a systemic impact to communities who may not have the ability to reach out to someone who could understand their plight and be able to provide them with resources and education and whatnot. So, even from a criminal aspect versus something that very affluent people can enjoy on a regular day-to-day basis, not everyone will have those same opportunities. Taking Dahmer into consideration for your example, if a black kid needed help, but and this has actually happened, calling an officer. I think there was this young lady who was calling about a dispute, a domestic issue, or something that happened at their house. And instead of the officer coming to support them and help them, they ended up killing these kids.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the very real issues that our country have. And that means that people who are being put into leadership roles can no longer ignore these matters. We can't just sit and be oblivious to the fact that there's a completely different outcome from one group of people versus the other.
Chappelle
Yeah.
has some really funny material around that.
Hmm.
Although I'm sure if you're of color, there's truth to it, and so you're like, that's partly why it's funny.
Hmm.
Um, but not it's funny in a sense. Obviously, it's sad and it's something that needs to be addressed, but you can really highlight it, and something
Yeah.
that where we can sit and laugh at something like that really makes it real. I think it's not just fantasy. So I think it's look. And it's not specific to sports. It's not specific to marijuana. It's not. So it's a bigger picture.
That marijuana thing is a whole nother level
Yeah, we just had a guest on
of
recently.
seeing how the system is just over and over and over again.
It's
Just,
the
yeah.
problem is, listen, I've never smoked pot in my life. I had this conversation with someone who's in the cannabis industry,
Hmm.
but we're trying to get Brittany Griner back, right? And you have to. I think it's got to be federal. The law has to be everywhere. And I don't have a problem with Biden pardoning some people who were on some real low level who never should have been there in
Hmm.
the first place. I mean, that's some stuff that should be corrected. But there are other people who were violating the laws on a much bigger scale who
Hmm.
shouldn't deserve a pass. They knew what the law was and they were going against the law. I'm not talking about someone smoking a joint.
Hmm.
We're talking about people who were really distributing and contributing. But it's a hot topic.
It is. And I'm conflicted in a lot of ways because even if you look at people who basically had made a career out of illegal, drug selling, I mean, why did they have to do it? Our society doesn't technically support people who were going into the prison system or jail system to be corrected, once they got out, there was little to no support for them. So how else can you support your family,
Yeah, that was the Morgan. I always go movies for me. Always they're entertainment, but there's always a lot of good stories and
Yeah.
lessons. Where Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption is like,
Oh, that's a classic one.
you don't care if I'm reformed or not. Why do you keep asking me if I am?
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
not what this is. What this is about. It's just going to be hard to. It's going to hard to. It's just you're not going to be able to make everyone happy. I think there should be equal, but not everyone. The reality is not everyone's going to have equal rights to do stuff, even if the rights and the laws are garnered towards having that. That's just
Mhm.
I'm sitting here
Well,
very
that
privileged in life, you know.
mhm.
and there's other people who don't look like me who have been very privileged in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I look at it as a privilege and not necessarily a white privilege, but there certainly is truth to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so even with the cannabis rules, I don't every state has their own particular rules. I do recall here in Illinois for you to own a dispensary or um what was the other one? Dispensary, I can't remember, but oh, like just the shop, the cannabis shop, you could not have been convicted of a crime. And that automatically rules out anyone who had been convicted of, you know, selling dope. It's I can't say it's a victimless crime, but it is not a physical attack on someone, right? Where we technically will see another person being harmed by someone else. Like there were willing people who were actually purchasing the drugs too. So if you want to talk about having them be reformed and they're being thrown into prison around something that other people are choosing to do, and now it's legal, but now they can't even make money the legal way off of something that they were doing that
Well, that's
criminalized
the
them.
incentivization of doing illegal things in a sense. But if I play devil's advocate here, why couldn't they sell something that was legal and been? I
I
mean,
mean, that's
you know,
that's a
sold
good
anything really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't want to get into the hairs of this because
Yeah.
it is very political. It is very political, but we're still looking at and dealing with the issues of systemic racism and the lack of actual reform and support for people who, if they do get a day where they're released from prison, what is the support that is available? People can't find a job. No one is going to hire them. So, what is your other option? Right? What is the other option that you have to support your family? Um, and I used to think like a lot of people on that, like you have a choice, but some people really don't. Like some people like there are people who've gotten convicted for having to steal baby formula. Like I've seen this when I was at the state attorney's office. When you are literally on your last and you don't have anything and you just want to make sure your kids have a place to live, to eat and to sleep, that's a whole nother mindset that we most people don't have to subject themselves to.
Yeah, the problem I think for a part of the problem for that is that people are like taking advantage of the system who don't need it, and it's not a huge number like people want to say. At the end of the day, you want to go on welfare, go on welfare. Not a lot of people lining up to go on welfare if they don't have to. So the number of that is big, but yeah, there's got to be the rich get richer. We see people spending all kinds of money on a lot of different things that I think could be spent on the less fortunate. I'm always going to advocate for that, for the greater good, and to try and fight for go
Mhm.
back to my favorite movie of all time, A Few Good Men, which meant fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. I think a lot of that has to do with the people in power, and again,
Mhm.
another conversation. But depending on who's in power, those are the people. Depend on what laws are going to be made to help and who's going to be helped by them.
Mhm.
So big day coming up next month with the election for the people who feel strongly about any type of reform and laws. When we talk about laws, these are done by the government for the most part, and you got to get the people in who are going to fight for what you believe in. Don't argue about what's going on. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? Who got in trouble? But then you don't bother to show up and vote.
True.
Yeah, that
Very
was
true.
like don't boo vote with Obama. You mentioned NIL. It's man, that if that isn't the wild wild west right now. I know you're getting heavily involved in it. I want your opinion on the state of NIL right now. I want to tell you a situation I had. We're trying to do some trading cards for someone, and the university's like, "Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that." And I'm just like, "Well, you trying to help the athletes? I mean, there's such a disconnect between the athlete and the institutions, and part of that is the NCAA's fault. They're not going to step in because they're the ones who got us in this mess in the first place, right? And so they can't step in and say, I don't know what's going to really calm the waters here. You have to have legislation, you have to have compliance, right? clear rules, transparency. There was a report that came out that none of these schools are offering up any information.
Yeah, so NIL, so one thing I always tell people is that NIL is nothing new. I've been supporting my clients technically with NIL before there was NIL in the college space because it's all around your intellectual property rights. I think for colleges, a lot of people are just they're nervous. They're not given a lot of direction, and then there is also the onus of potential liability if they are helping athletes too much, helping this one athlete versus the other, or giving them legal advice that they're not qualified to do when they're not their legal counsel. So there's so many different things that the school has to also consider, which I understand it from a counsel's perspective. But I do feel that these schools and universities, especially the larger ones, they have the budget to be able to bring people like myself in there, who can help athletes to understand, simple things. You don't have to be an attorney to recognize that, okay, if I don't have this particular piece or provision in my contract, then maybe I want to think about getting that in here, right? You don't have to be an attorney to recognize that, okay, I read something, I don't know if I really understand it, but this is how it made me feel. And I think when you're able to bring folks in to help athletes to not just even be better people, right? But to understand the aspect of business, they would be more well-rounded when college is over, or whenever they decide to transition out of the college space. One thing I also talk about is resilience. It's a huge mindset shift. I created this proprietary framework called Have Your Say. It's SAE, not SAY, because it was important to me for athletes to understand that they're technically in the driver's seat of their future. And one way that they can do that is one, by shifting their mindset, right? We all have a I guess this idea of what success is, but it's built around what other people have shown us that it should be. So once you define that for yourself, now you have to put yourself in the driver's seat to be accountable for that. You know what you want out of your life, not what mama and daddy want or your coach want or anyone else, but you are in the driver's seat of your own life. And then to empower them through education, which is extremely important. Um, most athletes that we've known of and people have been really rallying around the idea of not just persuading basketball and football players to take these what they would call basket weaving classes, but to really get an education to support them. Well, one thing about it is education can also be found outside of school. Listening to a podcast about business, reading up on an article of an interest to you, figuring out what are the roadmap to creating or doing a thing. It all is education. Coming to a conference about something that you want to do, it's a part of education. And so these schools, if they're really, really serious about supporting student athletes in this space, a lot of it is going to be on them to really provide them with the tools and the resources they need, because the truth of the matter is athletes don't know where they need to go and their parents don't know. It's all new for a lot of people. And so the school most of the times is the first place where they're recognizing, okay, this is something I should pay attention to. So it'll be a lost opportunity if their school doesn't get involved and try to help them on that front.
And they will. The fact there was a rush to get NIL deals, right? And so some of them, you look at them and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. What are they
Mhm.
actually paying them for? Again, no real rules or enforcement of certain things. But there's only the amount of people who are going to get these huge deals. It's not a lot. If as we look at the report of the schools that have, um, given reports, football is always going to be the big driver for this deal. And so these schools, I don't believe anything anyone says until you show me what it is. But they're getting a good amount of money. And it makes sense that they should be allowed to profit off of them. But again, they've been doing it forever under the table. We want to make sure that it's fair. for everyone, for the integrity of the sport, but then also want to make sure that it makes sense to help all these other people who aren't. It could be the gymnast, it could be
Mhm.
the track and field star. Um, where do you think NIL is? Today, now we're what, a year plus.
We were a little over a year.
Yeah, I
Year
mean, where do you think it is relative to where it needs to be?
I feel like it's definitely still in the infancy phase because a lot of people are still figuring out what can I do with NIL. The schools don't really fully know how to police it because it's really they won't know if a student athlete has a deal unless it's like super big and is publicized. So the only other way that they would know is if the student bring it to them. So how can they really police the compliance part of it if it's something small? So just trying to figure that part out in itself is an issue. But NIL has already started showing signs of trying to equal the playing field between male athletes and female athletes, which I totally appreciate. And I do think the as the further it goes on, I think female athletes would be widely more successful with NIL deals because one, most of them are just, in my opinion, this might be biased, but I think that most of them are just know how to approach certain deals. They know how to for the most part cultivate certain relationships, and I think that might just be the nurturing part of being a woman. um, so I do think that female athletes now have a better chance to be seen, but also to be empowered to pitch deals and companies who they want to work with and never really had an opportunity. And the same thing for other companies who have always felt like football and basketball was the way in. Well, you can diversify your company by engaging with people of diverse backgrounds and genders. So yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. There's a lot of things to work out, and I do hope that at some point the federal government will step in and create holistic legislation because it's too much to bear from state to state. And I think about the issues of student athletes, people who may need to transfer for one reason or another, how different their state rules could be from one state to the next, and what that could do to their eligibility and just all sorts of issues. So there does need to be some form of federal legislation involved.
Who is? I mean, a lot of people jumped in real quick and wanted to get involved. A lot of them don't have the athlete's best interest in mind, but that's nothing new.
No, it's not.
Who and everyone said it's like everyone talks about things as though they know exactly what's going on. When I think the majority of people in this space, the same thing with NFTs, they just don't. We don't know, but the people are out there saying definitively this is fact, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's again, like you say, still in the infancy. Are there people who you look at as like in the industry that are really knowledgeable and someone that you should rely on if they say something or if they're sharing something?
Yeah, I mean, so part of what I do is I try to cultivate relationships around people that not only can support in my efforts and my passion to help athletes, but who have and serve in a different way than I do. Because um, I would do athletes and my business clients a huge disservice if I was trying to be everything to them. So, that has included financial agents, people who really understand money, right? So, not just a financial agent of, oh, let me just take your money and invest it in something you're not going to know where the hell it's going. That's not what I'm talking about. People who are financial advisors, seeking to help athletes diversify, understanding how they get paid, where their money goes, bankers, and actually I've met some other attorneys doing the NFTs. I just came back from a sports and entertainment conference over this past week, just learning about how NIL plays into NFTs, and have become so much more aware because people have approached me with that, and I've been so nervous to touch it. But honestly, it's like, okay, this is all, it is really happening. It is. So if you don't believe NFTs are happening, jump in, because it really, really is happening. But you just have to know how it all comes about, like how everything plays out and how to protect your interest, who owns what in it. So that was very enlightening for me. But I mean, the people that I've partnered with and have done, I mean, coaches, professional development people, um I've had athletic directors who spoke on my panels before, because it was essential for me, to have people in who could speak the language of the athlete, right? They see and hear them day in, day out with whatever issues they have. And that's not something that I could necessarily do, right? I sit in a law office and work on files and cases and figure out how best to support my clients' businesses and interests. So for people who are really right there in front of the athlete's face, it's important to have their perspective. But yeah, to answer your question, there have been different types of people in different industries, which is what, athletes making moves, the NIL combine is all about, is bringing various experts from different industries together to help athletes holistically understand their name, image, and likeness, and how to protect it.
Yeah. So you mentioned athletes making moves. That's one of your sites
Yes.
to get NIL information. And then we have, scrolling at the bottom here, we have a Pro Sport Lawyer. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Pro Sport Lawyer is where the podcast is hosted, the What Are You Sporting About podcast. And it started out with a book that was written and published in 2020. I had no idea I was going to do a podcast. But one thing that I recognized was that when I was creating these webinars to talk about some of the issues that was in the book, it really was a promotion um technique in a way. And I realized that the conversations were just so deep. I needed to get people into a space where we can tackle little issues one at a time, to really help athletes move forward in their lives from wherever they are. And one thing I've heard is that it has helped people who have not even, who aren't athletes, right? But it's grown into its own thing. What are you sporting about is really a passion and purpose question. You can love the game all you want, but are you doing it authentically? Are you who you say you are? So,
100 plus episodes. Check it out. It's
yep.
on. Well, it's on the website, prosportlawyer.com. You can find all the information there. And then, generally speaking, your law firm.
Yes.
Is there a specialty that you work on?
So I practice in business, sports entertainment, and employment law. So if you guys are interested in legal representation and how I can support you can go to sldebarros.com, click on the contact tab, and it'll take you through the steps of how to connect with me.
Yeah, where you've written a few books. Talk about that. What made you want to write a book, and then you write another one? Is there more on the way? How do you get that?
Well, there's more legal articles on the way, but yeah, so in addition to the two books for athletes, I've also authored two children's books, which are the first two books of a children's book series called JoJo's Legal Adventures. It's inspired by my son. So, of course, like I've said before when we started out, law is my love language. So, even talking to the babies, I'm speaking law, but in a way that they understand it. So, that is all about just empowering kids from a younger age to understand, that, hey, I can or I can't do this thing, or I shouldn't or I should, but not to be afraid about what it is. If you think about adults, most of us don't even understand what certain legal concepts or issues are until we're faced or put in a position to have to stomach it and learn it. So that's what that's all about. What are you sporting about? Like I said, is it really led to the podcast, but it asked the question around passion and purpose, really getting back to the genesis of who the person is, and coming to a conclusion of why you are who you are at the end of it, right? And so the end of that book really speaks directly to the athlete to make some conscious decisions to help put them back in the driver's seat of their life. it's a lot of things I deal with in this book, and it's been pretty impactful, which has been a blessing to me because when you create something, you just want to get it out because it's in you, it's a part of you. It's been surprising sometimes to hear people come back and say how much it's helped them to gain some clarity around who they are and why they've been stuck.
And there's also always parallels for as you mentioned before, you don't have to be an athlete
Correct.
to resonate with you and to,
Hmm.
to have lessons that can be learned from it, whether
Exactly.
you're on the court or off the court. The same way, all the lessons that you're learning on the field or court could be used off, and same, vice versa.
Vice
Whatever
versa.
you're learning off, apply
Absolutely.
it on the court. Uh,
Yep. Yep.
do you have
And
any favorite sports movies, or do you watch a lot of the
um
30 for 30s? How
I
deep into
actually,
the
yeah, 30 for 30 actually inspired me to want to work with athletes. I never knew that that was a possible thing for a lawyer. So I never grew up thinking that I would be a sports lawyer because I just didn't know that that was a thing. You always hear about sports agents, but you never hear about sports lawyers. So, but yeah, when I watched the 30 for 30 Gone Broke movie in 2014, I want to say it was, and that really inspired and it was the thing that lit the match for real. I was like, oh my gosh, because I saw so much that could be supported. But I don't think I didn't have the confidence enough back then to keep pushing and grinding towards that. When I felt shut out, I was just like, okay, maybe I need to learn some more stuff. But really, I didn't need to learn anything else. I already had what I needed. It was just a matter of going after what I believe was necessary. And so some years later, it drudged back up in me, and now we're talking about two best-selling books, a podcast, freaking apparel line, a whole conference dedicated to student athletes. I mean, it's just a testament to what you can do, what you can achieve when you really just know what your particular superpowers are, but to be confident in what you bring to the table. Because one thing about it is an athlete can't teach me how to be a lawyer, right? So,
right?
you know, like I have that in the bag. But I had to learn how to be confident about it and to know that you have something that other people have not talked about or really approached in the way that you do. So go out there, be Sivonnia, be the protector of athletes, and see what happens. And at the end of the day, either you win or you learn. And at this point, I feel like I'm getting both. So,
What surprised you the most working with athletes from a legal perspective? Was there something that I sort of jumped out at you as you're working with them?
what surprises me the most about working with professional athletes is the mindset around money. It's very very surprising. You will see more professional athletes who would rather invest their money into things that will not yield them any income. But when, it's like, hey, you need them to invest this amount of dollars into legal support, it's a hard thing for them to grasp, right? So although you can go and buy this tangible thing, what does it do for you? Right? You automatically lose that money. So one thing that I have realized that I've had to work on with athletes is really the mindset, because when you hire an attorney, it's not an expense, it's an investment. And if you don't hire one soon enough, then you would really be losing money, because most cases, before you go into a deal or some form of situation, or you're giving people money without having certain protocols in place, an attorney could very well come in and save you a multi six figure loss, if not more. So it's just really working on that mindset piece about it, because I don't know if you ever heard the phrase like you can take a girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl,
Yes,
or
similar.
vice versa. Yeah, it's the same thing for athletes, and honestly, like even for the Black community, right? You can be taken out of a neighborhood where no one grows six figures, and then you're put into this area where you have multi-million, dollars, but you still have the mindset of living in a place that is either in poverty, almost destitute, or just hanging on, at a lower middle class level. That's a real thing. But
Yeah.
if you operate your life from a poverty perspective, you will end up physically in poverty. And so, even as a professional athlete, every day when you go out and you play your sport, or you practice, or you get in your car to go wherever, you are taking a risk because you know that there's a greater opportunity. And people should be taking more, not taking like more risk, but you should be more invested into you. You know who you are, you know what your capabilities are. You should be invested into you to the point where you feel that you're in the driver's seat to be able to make those investments for people who can help you save on the front end versus losing everything on the back.
Now these are athletes who have money and big brands. What about the athletes who don't have money to be able to
It's still a
afford?
mindset shift.
Yeah.
It's still a mindset shift. I encounter young business owners who, for the same reasons, won't engage with counsel because they don't feel like their brand is where it's at, like $1 million brand or what have you. But guess what happens? You might have that idea now, but if you don't move on it because of your mindset, someone else is going to come in with that brand. Someone's going to trademark that name. Someone's going to blow that shit up. And then you're going to be looking at yourself like, dang, I should have did that.
Yeah.
Right. It's still a mindset shift. You have to, if you believe in it, you should be investing in it. Period.
Yeah, they talk about. I mean, I guess maybe like Shark Tank, where you say you don't have a company, you don't have a product, you have an idea, but
Yeah.
you have to make that idea into something and protect them. I've trademarked Ticket Time Machine, and that's the ticket. I don't know
Mhm.
why, just did. I feel like it's going to be something that's worth having down the line.
You have to. You have to. I trademarked protector of athletes. Athletes making moves is coming on. What are you sporting about is trademarked. Like, no,
What's it cost to trademark? For people out here who are having no idea, it's not a ton of money. I mean, it's all
I mean,
relative.
the filing fee isn't a lot, but if you don't know what you're doing, it can cost you a lot. It could really cost you a lot. Because one thing that most people don't do is they don't research the brand that they're trying to trademark.
Yeah.
And if they don't understand how they're using it, for proof, then you're probably going to be denied that. If you are using a brand that has already been in use by someone who's a um registered brand holder with the USPTO, you could end up being pulled into court. But USPTO is gonna be like, nope. This person already is using this brand.
A lot of times, it's not worth the fight and the legal thing to get someone to. I mean, depending on how they're using. I just emailed someone say, hey, it's not a big deal, but I've trademarked this.
Mhm.
If you're going to use it, I'd love to speak on it, and I didn't even hear back from them. Now, could I go and do legal? I guess I could. Is it worth it for
And
me?
you
Probably not.
Yeah, well, you have to be careful with that too, because if someone is using your name and they're using it extensively and they're using it in the same
Yeah, that's the thing.
industry as you, then it could weaken your mark. And the USPT, and a lot of people don't know this, like, just because you have a registered mark doesn't mean that the USPTO won't take that shit back.
Yeah.
They could take your registration back, especially if someone wants to challenge it, saying that they've used it. Um, if your brand ends up becoming too weak or too generic because someone else has been using it. So
The, are you
yeah.
aware of the Lady A dispute, Lady Antebellum, the country band, and then
Mm-mm.
there was a lady. You should look into that. It's
What
interesting.
happened?
Well, this lady, it was called Lady Antebellum, and then it turns out Antebellum has some. It's not a term that should be used in these days. And then they went to Lady A, which people have been calling them Lady A all the time. And there was this Lady A who performed somewhere. No one's ever heard of
Hmm.
her. They tried to make a deal. It didn't go. Then she sued. I have to see where it's at, but you should look into it. It's a very interesting story about, and when I was trying to talk about this on Twitter, it got, it was a very racial divide on it, which
Hmm.
I think we should be able to talk about something, we're talking from the same team. We're on the same side. We should have a conversation. But I got in there, and man, I got roasted, just for saying what I thought was pretty obvious, and what also the law probably is gonna the law would say too. But it's interesting. But that it just speaks to the point of trying to find out who's been using it. Is there someone out there using this?
Right.
Because there's other things, and maybe you can do it, but you know, do the research.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very easy. It's just a matter of going onto a website. I mean, there's more extensive research you can do, but sometimes it's just as easy as doing a Google search or going onto the trademark site and seeing if anyone has this and is it active and what category is it, right?
Yep.
The same thing with trying to come up with
Part
a
of it.
business name,
Yep.
but they'll give you a business name as long as there's not another one in this state. So it doesn't matter if the same business name is in every other state. If it's not in yours, they'll give it to you.
Yeah. I
Unless it's
mean,
trademark.
trademark is more extensive than that,
Yeah.
but I mean, I understand that's what most people know about trademark is okay, well, as long as they're not in this particular industry, then I should be able to do it. But there are other issues and factors that come in play, which is why most people end up at an appeal board or filing a claim in court for some form of infringement around their marks, because sometimes it may not even be the fact that the brand name is the exact same. It could be the fact that maybe there is some form of confusion. Maybe you're targeting my audience in a way that infringes my mark. So there's so many different things to consider. I would say that if a person is thinking about trademarking their name and they have not yet done it, it doesn't hurt you to speak with counsel. Even if you don't have the money to move forward with the full on representation, still have some form of an attorney in your pocket that you can call. Even if it's just like, hey, what's your consultation fee? Pay that consultation fee, because if you do end up in a rut, at least you have a resource to go back to, instead of having to try and figure out, okay, what do I do? And then you lose everything.
My I have a quick story. My friends of mine have these pawn shops
Hmm.
called GNC, Golden Connection, GNC. It's 5 stores in Florida. They got a cease and desist from GNC, the workout thing, which is nothing to do with anything, and lost the battle because these guys had powerful attorneys, and a lot of money, had to rebrand everything. So while you think it's kind of benign, you got to check it out. We're gonna let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question we let everyone out of. You got 24 hours to spend with anyone in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose, and what would you guys do?
I would choose Oprah Winfrey. She is like the epitome of wealth, but she didn't start that way.
Yeah,
And so to be in front of someone that some so many ways kind of shares the same identity with me, I feel like it'll be an easier connection for me to recognize that she can be successful. I can too. What will we do? I don't know. Think about Oprah Winfrey. We'll probably be in like this amazing park or this super freaking pimped out house, um maybe having hors d'oeuvres, and she's probably talking about like some of her best books that I could use as resources and all these things. But simply, it would just be a dream come true to have someone like her to just pour into me, and not from her celebrity perspective, but just from being human and being a woman and being a Black woman in this country, and all the things that she's been able to overcome, and been able to align those with what I may consider as my shortcomings, but how they can turn into my superpower.
yeah,
So
I think that'd be a great choice. I'm trying to remember if she's ever been picked before. I think she has, but I don't know. Definitely a great choice. So many good things that she's done, and a powerful story of rags to riches, or just showing
yeah,
that you can make something of yourself. It's not always like where we start is not where we have to be or where we have to finish. So I
absolutely.
think if we got enough influence and money and power, we can make all of these come true for our guests. So we're putting Oprah on the list. Check out sldbarros.com prosportslawyer.com, Athletes Making Moves. Reach out to Sivonnia if you have any questions about NIL or legal information. And really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you at our events in the near future.
Thank you, Matt. And it was a pleasure being here. Can't wait to talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Of more great episodes this week, so tune in. Have a great night.